Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Wizard and the Priestess. You are at episode number
73.
73.
Who'd have thought?
Welcome. We hope that we can keep delivering interesting content for you all out there, and we appreciate you being here, listening along. And today, Matthew, what sort of joke do you have?
Not more of a joke, but more of a. Did I tell you about that time I worked at the circus?
No.
I worked as the human cannonball. That was
Uh-huh.
until they fired me.
Bum, bum. They just let you go. They're like, see you later.
Not something we talk about.
Uh-huh. Wow, it's just a one-time gig. Done. Ladies and gentlemen, I can't say that the jokes are getting any better, but I hope the content is enjoyable. Um, we are reaching a highest height on this 7-3, beginning of July. We have moved through the winter solstice. We are moving into more sunshine, more daytime, more brightness. If you are interested in the idea of the year of the snake, as we are, well, we're actually just past the first third because it'll be a February turnaround. But it is now that the snake's skin really starts to ripple off. And if you're interested in astrology, this next week is one of the most potent weeks in terms of the ending.
When is the skin off? Usually, is that like spring? Our spring?
Well, I'd say not that. I don't think the snake would shed. They don't shed in springtime. They shed their skin in summer. So,
I'm not talking about the actual snake. I mean
oh,
symbolically.
well, this is the thing. Symbolically, this is based upon the Northern Hemisphere, which right now we're in the middle of summer. So, if you are in the Northern Hemisphere, you would notice that you are being stripped clear of the skin. If you're in the Southern Hemisphere, and like I've spoken about before, where astrology and nature, I mean, actually, this has been a bit of a mind-bending week because I've been reading some interesting things, and it's kind of making me think even more about astrology and the way that it comes about. Now, I've spoken about it before in terms of astrology and the idea that we sort of need to twist it, even if we don't want to. So, tropical astrology is essentially following a time point that occurred 2000 years ago. And at that point, the sky looked a certain way. And then it mapped that whole year, and we now correlate it to that's why we have specific dates, exact dates. That you are, if you are born between this date and this date, you are therefore a sun sign Libra. If you're born between this date and this date, you are therefore this. However, there is a wobble in the earth, which means that what's happening up in the sky is not exactly that. So that's what sidereal astrology is about. Astrology is based upon what's happening in the sky above us today. It drops it a year behind. I mean, a degree behind. So now we are currently at 22, 24 degrees behind what is maintained by the tropical astrology. What's happening in the sky tonight is if you were to read the tropical astrology assessments, it would be 24 degrees behind. It's like one point something. And then, anyway, so, or it's actually less than one, I think. But what I was thinking, which is interesting, and I'm gonna swing it all the way around to what we talked about last week, but human design is this idea, the idea of Rah Uru, the with absolutely no what are those things? Tell when you inflections when you have the right, like if in your name you are Matt or Matthew. in our English Australian, but you might be machu
Oh, right,
in
yeah.
like what I'm saying is Rah Uru. I don't think is Rah Uru. I think
He's
there might be
definitely not
some,
Matthew.
well, there might be more inflections, is what I'm saying. His idea was it was based upon this design that was created based upon astrology and then the I Ching, which is the ancient Chinese text and based upon the 64 hexagrams. We have yin and yang. A dotted line is the yin, a single line is the yang, and then you go above and below that 64 times to actually get the seasons. Human design is based upon the I Ching astrology, so what's going up in the sky and the constellations. And I think he adds in the tree of Kabbalah and a few other frameworks. And he then has created what's known as human design. It also has the 2 points, the points where your design was created and the point of your birth. The point of
Mhm.
your design creation, I think, is 6 months prior to your birth. Either way, that is what human design has been based upon. However, that's human design. Then there's the idea that astrology essentially was created by people living in the earth and living one with nature, and then going, what's going on in nature? What do we see in the sky above us? So, right now, in the southern hemisphere, let me talk from a tropical perspective. Actually, I can't anymore. I don't know what the tropical astrology is doing right now, but we would be in.
So what are you saying this Ra guy, his thing on, was it free will that you mentioned?
Okay, yes. Was I too long-winded there? You
Yes,
want me to like.
get to it.
Yes. So Ra, his view on free will is the idea that it is illusion. There is only strategy and authority that will bring real alignment. Whereas Ra,
So
the
is
Ra that
so is he
Matt's talking
saying
about,
is he saying
says
that
that
free will? So sorry, can you say that again?
his belief is that free will is an illusion
Okay.
and that your human design, which is correlative to all of these things, the I Ching, the tree of Kabbalah or Kabbalah, the constellations in the sky, all of these things coming together, that is what will determine the path of your life, which means that it's this what actually will bring you into alignment will be in the like you'll be nudged constantly to the path that is set by that. And if you're having a hard life, maybe that was part of the that was set in your, or if you're having hard moments, that might have been set in your path. Likely that, I mean, that's what he is
But then
stating,
if you're
that that's what
incarnated
sets
and
the
nudged
line.
by the stars and the cosmic forces, isn't everything an illusion
Mhm.
then?
Isn't that the point in the first place?
Well, no, but your mate's saying that it's illusion, therefore it's made up. I mean, you could argue this entire reality is an illusion. That the free will is the, zero constraints. Sure, we have physical constraints, but if I tell you jump to the moon, you can you physically can't do it, or not yet. But if I say jump to the moon in your mind, you can go there in an instant. The only thing preventing that is arguably the physical constraints. So therefore, it's all going to be an illusion anyway.
The idea is that there is a framework that's been put in place that will keep moving you into this direction, and that the freedom is in within alignment with the design. So the freedom will come whilst you maintain alignment with design. If you move out of alignment of the design with which you have chosen to come,
Sure, life's going to feel more aligned on that path, but you can sway off it. by the choice of free will. Like if
Yeah, so
you're
the idea from Rah Uru, the human design guy, is more that you're a passenger on the trajectory of alignment of your life. It's your soul is evolving through the choices in which you choose.
well, if you're a passenger on the
Mm.
train, what does the train represent non-physically?
Chi,
So you're a passenger on the river or train of chi. Yeah.
I think so.
Okay.
Or energy, flow, movement, change, adjustment.
So I mean, scientifically, the universe is made up of two things. That's energy and information.
Hmm.
So the flow of energy and information we've embodied. So we are energy in form, information.
Hmm.
And so staying on that, don't know why I keep saying a river, but let's stick with the train. We'll keep it on track. Staying on the train. So the ego would be the passenger.
Well, that's you deciding that that would be the case in terms of the Ra that you look at. I don't think from Ra Uru, who is that, I don't think is his idea that it's
Right.
the ego.
Right. But the ego is the illusion. That's where I'm getting a bit.
It's just a really different framework
Mm.
to the idea and the understanding with which you like really connect to, which is so fun. I'm not mates with this guy. I just found it very interesting
Nor
that
endorsing human design.
I just personally, when we've been talking about this last time, I just really found that I find it interesting the idea that we may have, my perspective was that we may have less free will than we like if we consider the path. So say this train track, you can't actually get off the train. You're born on the train with mum and dad. You're on the track. You can't get off the train. This is the train. This is the path. There'll be a beginning and there'll be the destination. It may not be that you reach the destination at a certain period of time. I know that there's some astrologers that essentially spend time working those out, which I've read is about you can sort of see it on someone's natal chart. It'll be like a big clusterfuck of lots of stuff going on. And doesn't mean that necessarily the date that you'll die, but it could be like, it could be quite a lot of things. And there can be like, if you look back on someone who died at a certain date, you could probably see why they died on that date if you wanted to. And I think there are astrologers who spend a lot of time focusing on that, what you're talking about. And there's also something new that I've listened to or learned about this week that makes me think that there's a possibility that we actually choose death. I think the idea is that we're on the train and being in alignment with design means you're on the track and you actually can't come off the track. What I think might feel from that perspective is that you might feel like you're on one track, like you're tilting, the train's tilting, you've gone around a corner a bit too fast. And then that's when you feel off kilter. That's when you feel like I'm not doing this right. Nothing feels right. And then you land back down, you got your two train tracks, your wheels back on track again. And that's when you like start to just like lead by design, like you keep following that design. Now I don't think that that's the way. I'm just hypothesizing what he is discerning by the fact that his statement is that free will is an illusion or could be seen as an illusion.
Yeah, I can see where he's coming from. I think he's seeing it as we've, let's say, pre-incarnatively picked a track, life path, soul contracts, etc. And regardless of which way you go, because you've already made the kind of this is how the life's going to go on some level, good or bad. It's going to be what it's going to be type thing. Where in the Ra context, Ra refers to free will as like a primary distortion, and that anything is available if you're continuing to do the things you're doing, that's the probable outcome. Where if you get an idea to change, that's the possible outcome. Both are equally as real, and both are equally attainable. It's just the one you embody. But you have the choice either way. And
Yeah.
there's no
Okay.
future set in stone per se. It's only possibility, probability, because it's all
Yeah, and
happening now.
I think that's the same, like that has to be the truth, right? Because I could walk downstairs, I could fall downstairs, I could roll downstairs. Like it wouldn't be good if I rolled down the stairs, but there is the potential of me walking into the lounge room and going, I'm hungry for a snack. What snack will I choose? Like, I don't know whether I believe that I am so like incapable, I don't have a say in any of that. But what I do feel is that there's a point where I'm like, oh, I'd really like some choc chip cookies or something. And then there's an apple right there. But there's an apple, and I'm like, I really want choc chip cookie, and I'll have the apple. And I'm like, well, my nutritional needs are met. I just needed a quick snack, and I've taken something nutritious, which is great. So that's going to make whatever calm my nervous system and refill fuel a little bit. But I'm still not satisfied.
Hmm.
And it's like there's something there that then I will eventually cook. Now that I'm a baker, I will bake my cookies.
I forgot you're a chef now.
Well, I'm not a
You've
chef.
made three dinners.
I've made two dinners and I've baked. But I tell you what, they were good dinners. And I don't know, I'm the mother of all mothers. So just like watch out for what's next.
Just mumming. That just reminds me of what you were saying, psychics.
Ah, yeah.
I had a patient this week who it was interesting because her relationship to psychics is she's very gullible, sounds mean, but she's very easy to influence. So her psychic said that she's going to be in a car accident this week. Like,
Oh,
thanks, psychic. Now, I
so
know,
she's walking everywhere or?
well, she was day one because she was scared to death. A psychic can't tell you the future because there is no future per se to tell of. All the psychic is
Mhm.
going to do, assuming they're legit, is tell you what's happening in your psychic field. That's it. Now, that car accident could be symbolic as well.
So I'm thinking about that. So there's a lot of things about you need to believe or you need to know something to be real for it to come into your reality. And when you just spoke then, and the idea of it's just like the psychic can only see what's here, is it kind of like you're walking through the mist, or like the closer you come to it, it sort of opens up more? Is that kind of like life? So the psychic can see, like maybe, but like as far as your high beams, you can only sense as far as your body within the car. And then if you have like a bit of a cleric, like you've opened a few clairs or something, you might be able to see as far as your lights go. But it's like what's in the dark, but beyond the light, you don't know yet, which is sort of the future, or essentially, if you're on the train, the path that you're moving down.
Think of a sunrise and the sun, no, just before the sunrise, where you can just sort of see, or at least silhouettes, because it's like the pre light part of the day where the sun's just about to come up, but there's enough light for you just to be able to see where you're going without a light.
Okay.
It would be that's what the psychic would see. And you're still walking around with your torch.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
she
it's
hasn't
really
crashed the car.
interesting. Is the week over yet? It's only Friday.
Still time.
Hope you don't get a phone call. It's really interesting. So this week I was kind of promoted to look at this lady, Marley Daintree. She actually has an interesting podcast that talks about all things quite, yeah, she gets lots of guests on and they talk about all things. She's quite a German new medicine focused woman, but she's got lots of different cool people. Anyway, recently she said in a group that I'm a part of with her in, she recommended me to listen to this podcast and it had this lady called Ola Wolny on it. It's Ola. She was sharing about the possibility that we as humans are kind of living this code of astrology, or people like me that are kind of into what is called New Age spirituality. So I'm keen on astrology again, based upon what's going on around me. I'm learning from people that are not ancient astrologers. They're just people that have learnt through people in recent times, if that makes sense. And then there's the human design people and all those things. Anyway, there's so many layers to it, but it was quite an interesting conversation that she was sharing because she was sort of saying, she was sharing that whilst this idea of astrology, like she believed in astrology to some extent, but she believed that there was this idea that we had been distorted from our ancient roots. And I don't know, she was expressing that like what we actually, and this is what really hit home for me, what we actually need to gain from like, so personally, I've been in most recent times really correlated to the moon because the moon cycle in TCM, we kind of do the sun and the moon as the yin and the yang. But, and so the sun being the masculine and the moon being the feminine. And she was kind of, she was more like, was very well read on a lot of mythical and mystical historical aspects and like historical aspects. I wonder if you've read the Sumerian. Have you read that? Yeah. So she spoke a lot to that, and she was saying that there's a lot of like these things that people out there that claim that everything is a certain way, but then they can't actually understand what the Sumerian text is about or the tablet or whatever it was. So from her perspective, she was saying that for women, we should probably be so much more correlated to Venus than we should be to the moon because Venus actually does the same thing as the moon and it has phases and movements and all these things. And she was explaining more, which really got to me most was this idea that we think about going out in nature, the importance of being out in nature. And I feel like I hear that all the time now, especially from like clinicians. I'm sure in your practice too, whether it was before check or something around that, it's like we were trained to in a certain way that was kind of, I guess Paul's pulled all of the historical stuff to then give a framework. But I was given from Chinese medicine, it's like they've taken all the pieces that serve them and left the rest. If that makes sense. They wanted to make it more scientific, more capable for a Western mind to understand and to westernize the Chinese, right? They didn't want any religion or spirituality or mysticism in there, but actually there is a lot in ancient Chinese historically. Anyway, my point in sharing this is that what she was talking to in terms of being out in nature was that going for a walk in nature and breathing in the fresh air just isn't enough. Like we have to live in tune with nature and nature needs to live in tune with us. And this really was super powerful for me to hear because I have since we had a garden, I have always used like put my menstrual blood into the garden and I don't know, I heard it somewhere and someone recommended it, but no one actually explained to me
I just know
why.
I'm going to get 1,000 questions about this.
All right,
How?
well, I'll try and explain the
What's the
information.
what's the delivery system?
So the idea, right? Let me give it to you. The idea is that when we truly live, like I believe I live quite seasonally in a house. Focus on following the seasons. Try to slow down in the winter time. I take it more like softly and I light candles a lot and I do a lot of ritual through the winter. And then in the summertime, I tend to be much more active. I like to do more exercise. I eat lighter foods. I'm much like I spend a lot of time in the sunshine. What Ola was suggesting was that we need to do much more to be like if we want to be with nature, we have to code with nature. I'm going to coin that. I don't, that's not what she said, but we should be like connecting to nature in a way that that can communicate back to us. So when you put your menstrual blood, if you're a female, into the earth, or even as a male, you urinate onto the earth, you are giving back to the earth your DNA codes. For example, within my menstrual blood is my DNA code. If I put that onto a plant, it is then going to understand and get to know me more. And the same with if I'm planting seeds. If I put that seed inside of my mouth, I'm coding it in my DNA. I then put that into the earth. That seed is going to grow with my DNA, understandably vibrating around it. And then the plant will grow in a really, open your mind to this if you need to. But from my perspective, it makes perfect sense that it will then grow in a way that I need it. It will grow with the connection, with a deeper connection to me as its nurturer, as its carer. It'll then therefore be able to care for me because it's been coded in my DNA. It is activated through my DNA with its DNA, just in the way that GMO things occurs, right? They genetically modify plants. They put in someone else's DNA to ensure that that plant grows in a way that it stops animals from eating it or it adjusts. They recode the genetics of the plant to help it grow a
Just to
certain way.
rewind a little bit, what's the delivery system in menstruation to the soil? I just picture you going out with cups and
Yep, pretty much.
cool.
Or I sometimes will put it into the watering can and water it down so I can spread it further.
Makes more sense.
But yep, me with a cup. Yep, that is what it looks like. But it was really interesting for me because I've naturally felt really inclined to do that. And it's just been a thing that I've done. Maybe someone recommended it and I thought, oh, that sounds good. I'm going to do that. And then I've continued to do it. And then now I've kind of got this affirmation in the sense like, you know what, too? This also reminded me. They mentioned Avatar and the idea that the Avatar movie is actually what we are. Like, we are connected to Mama Gaia if we want to be connected. Like, I do this all the time, but I talk to the trees on the property where I am. And we planted, Aqua has a tree that we planted her placenta on top of. And on her first birthday, we planted it into the earth. And it was really beautiful because it was like she'd been in a pot and then now she was one. And we put her in the soil, in the earth, on the plant. And every day we drive past her, the tree. And I often tell her, I'm like, you're looking beautiful and strong today. Keep growing nice and strong. And then I look around at all the other trees, and because I was only talking to her, I started thinking, oh gosh, all the other trees need to be energized. And so I've started talking to them. And if I communicate to the trees, and I think I've talked about this before, where there was this ladies on YouTube and they talk or on some form of video, and they're like, nature, if you're real, come talk to me. And then like put your hand on my shoulder or put your leaves on my shoulder, and the tree moves and like puts its and it's not like there's a gust of wind coming. I really believe that we live on a planet that is akin to Avatar, that we are one, that we can be one with the animals and the plants, and the way that we have been living is actually in distortion to that. It is like in separate. And that is what the Matrix has created. And that's what this old lady is essentially talking to. She talks a lot to that the Matrix keeps us separate. And she also talked a lot too in this particular podcast about COVID. There were people out there that instantly thought, me and you included, this is a sham. This is not what they're saying it is. This is something that shouldn't have this much power and potency and impact. And why is everyone agreeing, or why is everyone going along with this? Then they had to get smarter and smarter and manipulate further and then start, blocking people from going to the pub. They found your Achilles heel and they nipped at it. It was quite interesting because I would say that a lot of people deeply innately knew straight away that that was a no. And then there was a lot of people that were like, oh, I don't know, this seems a bit like I'm a bit scared of this. And then they slowly came around, or they didn't, or they went the other way. My point is that there is something to these pieces and where it came, bringing it back to the idea of sort of astrology or that idea of free will, in that, like, there is something there innately guiding us that feels really powerful and nourishing if we like deeply connect to it.
How do we connect to that?
Well, you can create your own little garden and you can plant your seeds. If you're a man, you can also create your own garden, but it's slightly different because you could, wee on your trees or like connect to, like, we have this, urine is like the most sterile fluid, right? There's plenty of history of people like drinking their urine. I'm not necessarily recommending it, but there are seemingly quite a few health benefits from drinking urine. Now, my thinking isn't about that
Don't get it
necessarily.
mixed up with the menstrual cup.
Well, I'm pretty sure you couldn't, right? Anyway, I just feel very much attuned to this, and especially the more that I live within what I feel is more towards what I am meant to do here, whilst I do still see myself as some form of healer or have the energetic code, one might say. Code seems to be this word that's a bit of a pop word at the moment, but I quite like it too. But for now, I am so driven into motherhood and focus is on my children and then all the things around that. So I'm running a garden club with the local homeschoolers. Hambers has been teaching them all about growing their own gardens, and I've been holding space for these little kids in kind of interpreting nature, connecting to the energy of what is going on in nature around us. And it's been such a beautiful thing to watch these little kids' minds sort of open themselves and adjust and accept and like interpret the tree and really deeply connect to the tree. Like, we can learn all the species of the trees, but do we understand that the vibration of the tree is one with us or akin to us? Do we understand that without the tree, we actually don't live? That do we understand that whilst I'm sitting here, there is a network underneath me communicating? There is a network, a root system that I couldn't even fathom that's having communications, sharing information constantly underneath. So yeah, it's quite an interesting. So yeah, what do you think with like consciousness?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's no secret, and what you were saying before, that's no secret that absolutely everything in this reality is connected. We all breathe, every living thing on this planet breathes the same air. We all need water. Every living thing needs water. Even like what if you look at a rock or a stone, it's very much alive. If you have a bit of, was it salmon you cooked for the first time
Hmm.
ever? Yep. That
Second time.
that salmon is still very much alive. It still has chi running through it. So when we eat, for example, we take on the consciousness of the thing that we're eating. So if we eat a salmon, we're taking on the consciousness of a salmon. If we eat a carrot, we're taking on the consciousness of a carrot. Now, whether it's contaminated with pesticides and disrupts all your hormones, that's a different story because that's going to alter your perception by blocking certain pathways within the individual to not be able to perceive that reality as clear as they potentially could. I think it's interesting that you put your menstrual lings on the soil because fertilizer, a potent fertilizer, is blood and bone. Blood and bone, seaweed, and all that kind of stuff. They're very potent fertilizers and give the soil what they need. And a lot of people don't realize that the plants and the soil microorganisms need that in order to function optimally. And that doesn't happen on commercial farms because it's always monocropping. They need different, you need different variations of crops to make the healthy soil, to make the soil healthy. And that's how things grow optimally. Now, if that's how things grow optimally, you are what you eat, aren't you?
I think it's interesting because I feel like you're talking to something deeper that we're maybe missing, and this is probably the point and the alchemy that comes from when you really truly connect to life and earth and the flow of natural, like the deeper living organism that is the earth. That when we fertilize, like blood and bone is not human form. We're afraid, you've got to let your feces cure before you use it. Like, because I think, like composting toilets, right? They use human feces. Like, obviously, you poo into them and then they become compost, but they have to cure. They need to be set over time before you actually use them in your garden. And I'm not saying that that's not the right thing to do, but it is quite interesting when we come back to that and utilize our own feces and utilize our bodies. It's still this idea that we are not one with the earth in a sense. It's like, oh, we use a composting toilet because it's like, we're not, it's a waste, not want not kind of thing. But if you take it one step deeper and consider it a way of like communicating with the earth that you're using, a way of connecting this piece of this DNA. And like we've spoken about, we're what? We're 90% microbes, then 10% DNA. But within that, our fecal matter, our urination, our blood, that's like in essence, like where more DNA lives or within it. Or it might be the excrement might just be more about what microbes are living within us, our organism as a human, physical, with boundaried skin kind of thing. But I feel like we can take it, it's just like taking it one step further of like that connection to earth, that real deep connection to like it doesn't have to live in the realm of mysticism outside of our minds. It's within our body and using the physicality of our body and connecting that back to the earth. I
So,
feel like, I don't
talking
know,
about connection, then briefly in our pre episode, let's call it meeting, you mentioned the P word and how they were built.
Matt, what is the P word and how what was
Pyramid.
built? So the pyramids, were you wanting to dive into that? There is an aspect where we're missing a deeper layer to ourselves, and new age spirituality is trying to guide us back there, I do believe. Or at least someone like myself is being guided back to the innate knowing. I felt deeply connected to that tree, to the people, like how they held hands, how connected they were. There was something in that movie that really like awoke something inside of me that was like, this is real. This is what it is. This is what I believe to be true. And then when another, when Ola Walney has shared something and I'm like, wow, I've been doing that. And then it's like, wow, it just opened my eyes a little bit more. It's kind of, I feel like taking that next step back into, you know, the connection back to Earth, which I believe was there way back when. Because when we think about the pyramids or these sacred spaces
So
and
many technologies and ancient technologies and structures that we can't build today.
Why is that? Why can't we build them?
Depends what book you want to read. But let's talk about the pyramids quickly. What were you going to say?
I just don't believe we built them. I don't believe they're human made. I believe that they are not made by humans, at least humans like ourselves. They're definitely being placed here or produced here or, yeah, they're not human created. They're not like little slaves spent 10,000 years pushing one brick. That's the story I was sold. One brick at a time, because we know, like, I've had friends, I have never been, but I have friends that have spent time in, and you can't take, there's no, you're not allowed to do any kind of meditation when you're there. You're not allowed to, like, it's quite particular about, like, the energy that is around those areas, those sacred sites. And anyway, yeah, what's your belief, or what have you learnt about how the pyramids were created?
What resonates with me, and hear me out, they were built by thought. I'll leave you just a moment to gasp in amazement. Let me know when I can continue.
You can continue.
Okay. So the larger pyramids, they were essentially built what they would call by the force of one. So imagine, if you will, everything is alive. Okay, so you look at a stone, and regardless of distance, regardless of size, weight, etc., that stone is alive. However, it is a lower density than yourself. Right? With me?
Hmm.
So imagine connecting your brainwave to the molecular structure of the stone.
Hmm.
When you can do that, and this is how people bend, swords with their minds and all that kind of stuff. Similar sort of concept. When your brainwave connects to the molecular structure of the stone in this instance, there becomes an energetical hierarchy, and you can inform that stone what to do and how to move and how to act and all that kind of stuff. So that's how they can move the stone. Now, isn't it incredible that it was built with such mathematical precision to, like, was it 9 decimal places or something ridiculous like that? And how it aligned. But the pyramids were built initially as healing chambers because it required the Nile beneath, or whatever river it was going beneath, to create a resonating chamber. And they used specific types of granite and specific types of stone to create the electrical field, which worked with the electromagnetic field. And when you laid on the stone with a specific, when the moon was in a specific place, the stars were in a specific place, it filtered down through these chambers and allowed you to have what they call the God experience. It's also how they initiated a lot of the priests in the day as well. But then eventually the royal families got a hold of it and they wanted it for themselves and blah, blah, blah. But essentially, they were built as healing chambers. And if you think of it, the energetic spiral around a pyramid, it's wider at the base and it gets more and more concentrated as it swells up until it hits what we would perceive as like a laser beam. So that laser beam is pure, what we would call today is scalar light. It can travel anywhere in the universe in an instant, in all directions. And it can heal essentially anything.
I think I've always thought, I mean, I guess that in that sense, then it could be the idea of, so I feel like I've heard of this when I was in Bali. I think I've touched on this, that like they, the people that I was speaking with talked about that breatharians, which were humans, humans used to live for up to 4,000 years. Like there was not a, they had pure health and all these things. And what they found was actually in Bali, the reason Bali is such a like Mama Bali and such a healing place for people is because it actually has relics within it. And it has quite a few tantric temples within it. And those tantric temples were actually a place where a man and a woman would go together to help create life, which would be the best sort of life, like the child with the most, the healthiest child kind of thing. It wasn't just a sex pen or a sex den or whatever, like tantric sex. At times, there's been, the idea that tantric sex is all about orgies and things like that. But more, these relics were more about the divinity of creating matrimony within the connection, kind of what you just shared about the pyramid that shot that light. What did you call that light?
Gala.
Yeah, so that scalar light being this, that's, I think, sort of similar. And then, they built a temple over the top of it. And, then it's kind of like, okay, the religion in power at the time took over it and saw it as a sacred site, obviously understood it to be a sacred site, but then turned it into their own. But what actually, like we've spoken about Adam and Eve a lot, but that idea that, eating the fruit wasn't the issue, it was just eating in general. It was eating the food that actually changed the human form from being the breatharian that could live for 4,000 years to now not. And therefore, within that time, when, these pre Homo sapien humans were living, they, could do this thing where they actually could get to that point where they connected so deeply to the rock that they could move the rock and actually adjust the frequency. So I really like that idea. It seems far-fetched, but we're only as far-fetched as limitations we place upon our thoughts itself. So I feel truly that in time we will actually be able to do things. Maybe not in our lifetime because the limitations are set at such a collective low density frequency. And this is what another thing I resonated a lot with what Ola was saying is that the Matrix and all of this stuff that's going on is kind of like, I think she calls it like parasites, but I could see it as more like a low density frequency. You know, most of us, which this is paraphrasing Ola, by the way, most of us live a fairly average life comparative to what we'd like to live. You know, we're not living like the constant vibration that's going on around me right now is the increase in prices. Now, I've never really connected to it too much, but now when my chalk drops that used to be like my organic 70% chalk drops that were, I think I used to pay $26 for half a kilo, are now $49 for half a kilo. No changes to the ingredients, no changes to the size, but the price has doubled, almost doubled
I think
in,
most things.
and so actually probably in less than 3 years. So there's something amiss here. There's something vibrationally off. And because the average person is not doubled, their income has not doubled.
But
And it hasn't done so for a very long time. It is now almost, when it comes to money term, when we even consider money, this thing that we essentially need to an extent. But like I feel like the higher density or the higher frequency we can vibrate at, we will find ways where money is less and less necessary, or it is just much more attainable. That abundance is so much more attainable for all of us. And I think that that's something that I feel like maybe this is what that whole energetics of the snake and the movement, which will next year will come into the fire horse, which is probably going to be a pretty hectic year, I'd say, because obviously the fire horse after a snake of shedding, like that's a go. That is a very, very, very fiery. It could be a massive, like, I don't know, massive shot of horsepower.
so going back
Yeah.
to cost of living
Yes.
and how that ties back into free will. Think of cost of living as an example. Pick one thing, everything, whatever. Think of who dictates those prices. So in other
Yeah,
words,
I was
trace
saying
it
that.
back as far as you can.
I was saying this to my family last night at the dinner table. I'm like, who gets to make these decisions? It must be the
Corporations.
Rockefellers.
It's
Yeah,
corporations
the
that
Rockefellers.
determine that. Now, isn't it funny that we can buy commercial food cheaper than organic food? So, in other words, the less the farmer has done to it, the more we have to pay,
Mm,
which makes no sense. But the farmer
yeah,
has to obtain their own certifications, organic certifications, and get their soil tested regularly. And they don't get as many subsidies as the commercial farmers. All that, none
they'll
of it.
overseas.
No. So you trace that back as far as you can get. You'll ultimately get to some kind of corporate entity of
Mm,
somewhere.
mm-hmm.
Now they put the price up. What does that do to your perception slash illusion of free will?
It makes you feel like you have less
Like, yes, you get
contraction,
that
squeeze.
restriction. You like you're being, you know, strangled by a snake, and that is where you have a choice, and that choice can be, I can keep going this way, and my future or my days ahead probably look like this. Or, as you were saying before, evolve yourself. And that involves connecting to yourself. So you're spiritually evolving. Then you will realize that you actually need less and less and less and less
Mm,
until you need nothing but air if you're a breatharian. The point is that
fantastic.
we can get stuck in the pain and the shackles of becoming victim to the corporations, or we can see the game for what it is. And if you were to really strip your life back to what you need, you would likely find that you don't need much.
I do agree. Part of me thinks, though, that there is something to the idea that we either have to succumb to what they say or we strip our lives back to need nothing. And I feel like there's a place where we have what we want, not just what we need, whilst not maintaining. And I'm not saying, the fancier car. Like, I'm not saying upon the matrix. I'm just saying, as a person now living in the country, impacted by floods, impacted by fires. Quite, the other week Hampus had built out like beautiful gardens. They were flourishing, and the kale and the spinach and the few of our leafy greens were ready for harvest. Beans were ready for harvest, and everything was growing and blossoming beautifully. And then sheep ate it all, and it's gone. And all of that energy that was really like deep love, gratitude for the earth, beautiful flourishing gardens, that harvest is completely gone for now. And like, whilst it's an absolute learning lesson, I believe that there is a part for me that says that we can still do that and continue to grow, but we can still have the abundance of that too. Like, we don't have to miss out. Or I think that there's something more to the idea of that increased frequency, but it has to sort of happen on a collective basis, because whilst I believe you need to focus on what you're doing, there is something collectively that needs to burn to the ground in order for the frequency of the earth to come back to where it needs to be. And so I would suggest what needs to happen is that we get so connected to the nature that we are and reconnect to what you're sharing about in terms of really getting down to the nitty-gritty of what we really need. But what we really need, like on another level, is connection and love. And society and the matrix as it is does not support that. You cannot, as a child, get enough love and connection whilst both your parents work full time and you are sent to childcare or school for 15 years, or even, what is it, 18 years of your life, maybe 17 if you got a year with your mum, or maybe up to 3 years with your mum, but you have like 15 years away for most of the time from your care, from your primary carer, mother or father, who are there to guide you and like who love you more than anything.
But it's
That is true. They would have definitely,
well fed.
well-fed flow through vibrational powerhouses.
Yeah. And the parents working the two jobs, I mean,
Well, they're just working one job. They're
that's what I
both
mean. They're
working.
both working. So unless they're doing the exact same job, they're doing two jobs, is what I was going with. Well, they're doing that because they have to have all the stuff as well for the average person. Not saying it's a good thing.
Unless you're getting like some form of benefit from the government, you cannot afford to, for an average person on, say, I don't know what an average wage is, 70,000 a year.
No,
Even that might be high, I don't know, but say between 60 and 80,000, so let's go with 70. 70,000 a year, you've got your rent to pay or your mortgage to pay, and then
here's
you've
something.
got,
How much do you think you need to make per year?
oh, I think it's probably around that. It'd be around, I think the top 1% is about you earning over 15,000 a year or something like that.
32,500 a year. You are in the top 1% earners on the planet.
Yeah, but I could tell you now, that is the whole point that I'm trying to make. That I am in top 1% earners of the planet, and therefore the 99% inhabitants of this planet are not living a fruitful life in the sense that they may be living a fruitful life in the way that they have deep love, they have community. But I would say that there's good 50% of people, human people, that are probably not living a very fulfilling life. I would say that there is enough people that are in the top 1% that are not living a fulfilling life. And I would say then we probably have about 30%, maybe less than 30% of the whole world population that are living a fulfilling life. And most of those would not be in the top 1%. I would say majority of those are not in the top 1%. However, the things that like, yeah, it just feels like this is where I've gone down a bit of a rabbit hole because I believe, I mean, I don't believe, I think that it's curious that potentially there is something that like there is some sort of negative energy that's been placed upon human earth. We're not actually meant to have as hard a time as we're having.
Well, I think that would come back to the systems. I don't think the system's designed for us to live.
Thrive.
And it would start, I mean, at school. With school, they teach you nothing about the real world. They don't teach you finances or they don't teach you,
Life,
relationships,
living,
all the stuff.
growing, relationships, connection.
But then the parents didn't learn that either. And it keeps going back and back and back. I think we're in an environment, our culture is the main spell is to develop obedient consumers and where too much is never enough. That's the collective unconscious mindset for most people, not all people, but if you're looking generally at the West, that's the entry level. isn't it funny if you go traveling to a poor country, those people living in the country are just so unbelievably happy? If
There's a
you
depth to their happiness that's different. There is a depth to that happiness, but there's also a trade-off on that too, because they have a deep want to be like you.
and our inner child and arguably soul wants to be like them because they're happy.
Mm.
They perceive us to be happy because we got the money, but yet with the
Because
with
they've
all,
been sold the same story.
well, it depends where you are in the world, really. I went to Cuba, and that the general population in Cuba is not rich, but they're the happiest people I've ever met. And they don't necessarily have the same aspirations because they don't know any different. But then again, I heard a quote from somewhere, sometime, that there's no such thing as a poor country, only poor people. There is no government in the
Mm.
world that is not rich.
Yeah.
Just going to drop this mic right here.
On that note, guys, make sure you feed your soil. And
Everyone go outside and do a wee for the planet.
and yeah, deep connection. Lean in.
Thanks for listening, guys. Feel free to leave a lovely comment and a 5-star review. And we will then do a wee for you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
You've been listening to The Wizard and the Priestess. Thanks for stopping by. Stay connected and be open.